was burned! So she's kind of a goat. Oh, there's a person? Let me get in their butthole. The worst punishments in human history.
Let's start with the bad and slowly work our way towards the stuff of nightmares. Number 10, the Rat Dungeon.
The what? How is number 10 the Rat Dungeon?
If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period, you would have definitely heard about the Rat Dungeon. Since
I was
this
not
punishment
alive.
struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness.
Bro, he already looks dead. Is that guy not dead?
But here's the thing. The dungeon was connected to the nearby river and just below the river's waterline. So that when the water levels rose, all the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. This would of course lead the hungry and angry rats towards the entrance of the dungeon.
And they would eat them? Wait. I didn't know rats gotta swim down river. I thought that's like a fish thing. I didn't know rats go for a swim.
Where they would then come face to face with the prisoner. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything. And all he would hear were the soft scurries of the rat's feet entering the dungeon.
Because it's
dark. And in a matter of minutes, these soft noises were in the hundreds and all around him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending himself. Now, he might be able to shake the rats off for a few hours, but eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion.
You can't, like, 1v100 the rats, like, starts trying to smush them or something? You know, if that was me, I'd be punching those rats, okay? I'd be fighting for my life.
And while he slept, the rats would continue to take bites from his flesh.
Oh my God.
Eventually, when he would wake up, he would discover hundreds of bites throughout his entire body. But it didn't stop there. The prisoner was left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime.
Bro, how do you even stay alive? If you're missing chunks of your face, are you not gonna die? Also, don't the rats have a billion diseases that are gonna kill you? Is this a punishment or a death sentence?
But towards the end of the medieval period, this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution, where prisoners would just be thrown in the dungeon and forgotten about. Number 9.
How kind. Feeding you to the rats. It's kind of like to the dogs. Would I rather be eaten by a dog or a rat? I feel like the dog would eat me faster. Maybe faster is better.
The rack. This was yet...
The rack? Wait. Is this where they stretch them apart? What is this?
This was yet another punishment that took place in the London Tower. The rack was a torture device that was used in many places throughout history. This form of punishment was originally designed for getting a confession, usually from criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war. The device looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin. You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet pulley system, where 2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows with every single turn.
Isn't this what you say? Like, they say you're supposed to do this to make yourself taller? Were they just encouraging you to try torture techniques to make your legs longer? Because isn't that what, like, Grandma come around and be like, oh, let me stretch your legs. Let me make you a little taller. No, Grandma, you're killing me. You're torturing me. That's a torture device.
This was all done to get information, but of course, a lot of the times the truth was not accepted as reality. And the prisoner would then begin to say whatever he believed the officials wanted to hear.
Bro, his legs are so long. His legs are so floppy and long, they're just on the floor.
Sometimes it would work and the prisoners would be let go, while other times they would be tortured even more for lying. When the whole ordeal was over, prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed. That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated.
Do they just leave them outside in the wilderness? They just left her out in the garden and said good luck. And she can't even walk? She has to roll around? Can she even roll? Bro, this is messed up!
She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the stake.
Oh, never mind. They didn't even let her roll. She wasn't even allowed to roll. She was burned. She was burned!
All this because she read and memorized scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women, which were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture. You
So she's kind of a goat. She's not a snitch.
see, during this time period, if you followed any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody,
True.
including your own husband,
Oh,
which
no.
was the person that turned her in. Number 8. Keelhauling. This brutal punishment was carried out at sea on sailors who would steal or be violent towards others and would usually result in death. Keelhauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with a rope, then looped around the entire circumference of the ship.
How do you put around the whole boat? Is the water not gonna get in the way? They got crazy tech back in the day. Well, they had to get creative. They didn't have like guns. They had to get a little creative with how they got answers, okay? Because I guess a little swashbuckling sword isn't as scary as a gun. So, you know, they had to get creative and tie a rope around the entire boat
Before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard while the group of men on board pulled on the rope to slowly drag him around the outside of the ship,
Oh my
including
God.
over the keel.
So he would just be entirely underwater? How did he not drown?
Which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it, since they were dead before they ever reached it. Kinda just depends on how hard the guys on the rope feel like working that day.
Oh, depends on how much they want to tug on the rope. Because if they don't want to tug it fast enough, you're just gonna drown underwater. Oh.
Not only would the sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the outside of the ship. But if by some miracle a sailor actually happens to make it all the way around the ship without dying, one of 3 things will happen. 1, he would be sent for round 2, and
Oh
for
my
sure
God.
be dead by then.
Well, of course, and if he can survive round 1 and his neck snapped in half, I guess this is when he goes back like on round 2.
2, be freed and allowed back on the ship.
Why would you even want to be free if you're bleeding out? He may be alive, but probably not for long. Like, just send me back in. Honestly, I'll go for another round. I'll go for another ride on the roller coaster of death.
Where he would then slowly die to infections.
Oh,
Or 3,
yeah.
live the rest of his life single and being made fun of, since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe.
Oh.
Number 7.
Hey, but that's kind of cool. He's got a story to tell. You're telling me nobody wants to date someone that has that horror
Crushed
story?
by elephants.
Ah!
Now we are getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was most recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really
19th
not that long ago if you really think about it.
century?
Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of these. What
Bro.
type of crimes would you have to commit to be crushed by an elephant, you might ask? Well, apparently if you failed to pay your taxes, that was good enough.
I feel like there's like a third of the country, of the United States, could technically qualify for this. All of the billionaires that don't pay and have to pay like a $200 fine, instead of the $200 fine, they're rolling out the elephant. Then maybe they just start paying.
And of course, stealing or being an enemy soldier was also a great way to become a tortilla. But the
Tortilla? That's diabolical. Don't call him a tortilla,
most
bro.
disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal Emperor of India ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and needed some entertainment. The guy who forgot to pay his taxes, crushed. The man
That's
who
your
stole an apple from the
entertainment?
local market, crushed. The little orphan who jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man who murdered his neighbor and added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright.
Oh, he's okay. He's okay. You know, he didn't do that bad. You know, it could have been worse.
Apparently he makes a damn good soup.
Oh.
There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same. There's always a guy on top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant.
Wow, they're so cool. They control an elephant that kills people. What happens if they fall off? Do they get smushed by the elephant? Is the, elephant able to kill on its own? What if he wants to step on somebody? What if it's not forced? What if it was intentional? Then what?
Now be impressed. The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate. Here, the criminals would have their arms tied behind their back and their heads placed on a pedestal, where it was then crushed like a grape by the elephant's foot.
Thank you, elephant. So kind.
Now, the second method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go.
But if you don't die on the first step, do they gotta do we gotta go back around elephant round 2?
But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm. So the elephant then has to make a U-turn and try again and again and again.
Oh my
God. The final and
God.
worst way is when a highly trained elephant was guided to slowly crush the person limb by limb. They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusk until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso. This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the fourth Mogul love to take.
So you like the show. You gotta do the whole routine. Do the elephants know that they're being taught to kill people? Like, aren't elephants pretty smart? I thought there's like recorded instances of elephants like think of humans as like their pets. So are they self-aware that they're killing these people? Like, are they chill with it? Are elephants secretly evil? I don't know.
That made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone. Except for the fourth Mogul. He loved it.
He loved it.
Number 6, impalement. Probably one of the grossest and most cruel forms of punishment on the list. This has been used by a few countries throughout history, but was most recently used in Egypt in the 17th century. Usually against criminals that were highway robbers, grave thieves, or anyone who would try and start a rebellion. This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door.
You're increasing the size of the butthole to put the steak in there? That is disgusting.
And as soon as that incision was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop the blood. They would then thrust.
How kind? I was about to say how kind, but that guy looks like he's kind of enjoying it, to be honest.
Thrust in a long wooden stake that was the width of a man's arm, which was sharply tapered on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet, pushing it further and further in. And of course, the steak was greased up beforehand to make this process a lot smoother.
Of course, you gotta get... is he okay?
And once the steak has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a busy road, like a Halloween decoration.
Why? Why are we traumatizing the people on the street? Is this supposed to, like, send a message? It's definitely sending a message to little Timmy over there.
To remind everyone that this is what happens when you break the law. They will be left there for the entire day and removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You see, on some occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just deep enough to keep them in place, but not too deep that it would cause immediate death. They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further. They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help.
What? How are they gonna help you? Are you already doomed to die? Like, your intestines are stabbed through. What can you do? You're gonna die eventually. It's just a matter of time. Even if somebody got him off the stick, he's dead. There's nothing you can do.
Until eventually succumbing to their wounds. Number 5. Poena cullei. Poena cullei is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was, just a lot more terrifying and cruel. This was an exclusive punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members. This was first seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the Germans in the 18th century. This all begins with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag.
That makes sense. It is called this in the sack.
But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey.
What? Why they pick all of those specifically? It's like we're making a team. Let's get the human and then a dog and a chicken, a bird.
I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil family murderer doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then sewn shut.
Is it so they eat him? I feel like the dog would try to eat like the chicken before he eats anything else, because that's kind of like his natural what he would eat, right?
creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no. This is just the beginning, because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean. But don't worry, later on, these murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where they can perform the act of being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers.
I feel like I'd go the Colosseum. At least like you can make a name for yourself before you die. What if you start winning and then the bear kills you? But like you're winning for a second and they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy was almost the slayer of the bear or something."
At least they had the option. Number 4, rats. This is one of the most sick punishments in all of human history, and it involves the use of rats.
Don't like half of them involve the use of rats? I'm starting to understand why we had that plague with the rats. Maybe it's because we were using too many rats, and then we were too chill with rats, and they infected us.
We'll cover 2 of them here, as they are very similar. The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568, during the 80 Years' War. A Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach, chest, face, or groin. Then the back of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go into a full-on panic, trying to escape from the heat. And its only way out was to burrow into the human.
He just wants to escape! Bro, you're not gonna escape unless you get all the way through.
Once inside, it would continue to chew and tear apart whatever was in its way, desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner.
It came out of his mouth? How did it crawl all the way up from his stomach to his mouth? Oh my god. I cannot even imagine what does it feel like to have a rat running around in your body? I don't want to know. Nobody ever offered to let me feel that. I don't want to know.
But the second method was much, much worse and was highly secretive, since it was used under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976 through 1983. They called it the rectoscope.
The what?
And I'm sure you have already figured out where this is
recto.
going. Yes, it's exactly what you think. They would place a tube on a prisoner's back door, then insert a rat inside of the tube. The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they actually expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on.
How? How are you supposed to focus and answer questions when a rat is in your booty hole?
Eventually, the rat would find its way in and begin to move forward to find its way out. Nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge.
So he had a lot of experimenting that he did on these people that went missing with the rats. I wonder what it must be like to be one of those rats that they use in this. And they're like, they're putting me in a lot of buttholes today. I guess I gotta get out. Bro doesn't even know he's doing anything bad. He's just trying to get out of there.
Gibbeting. The last known use was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan. This all came to light in 1921 when the National Geographic published this image in their magazine. This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching Boston. Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of punishment so much.
Of course they do.
This was used on
of course they do.
Murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort.
Who passed this act? Who passed this act, bro? Why does everything have to be so gruesome? Back in the day, they just really wanted to make a statement, apparently. Just really, really wanted to make a statement.
134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this.
Maybe I'm glad I'm blocking that for you guys. You see that? You see that? Yeah.
It was an all-steel cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move. They were then hung 30 feet or more off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But I can only assume this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with a dying man begging you for a sip.
Bro, what's even the point? You're gonna die anyway. You're in this freaking cage where you can't do anything. You're just gonna die. It doesn't matter if anybody gives you a little sprinkle of water, bro.
But the annoyance and torture of the public didn't stop there, because after the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end.
Years? Why years? Why do we have to make a statement so bad? We just leave it there for I understand why they got the plague, guys. I'm kind of understanding why that happened. I'm really understanding, because this is disgusting.
With the locals complaining that the smell of death was so pungent that they couldn't even sleep at night. There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years.
20 years? 20 years? Bro, his kid's gonna walk up and be able to see him 20 years later.
Before a government official would finally remember to clean it out.
Oh,
Number 2,
of course.
Scaphism.
What was that picture? What am I looking at? Is he being eaten alive by bugs? Is that what this is?
This was a form of punishment that was used by the ancient Persian Empire on anyone that would be convicted of murder. First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water. They were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full.
Ew!
They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well. After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle of the lake where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun. But the sun would soon become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes the person to get extreme diarrhea.
They wanted him to poop himself! I thought it was for the bugs. I thought it was to attract bugs and ants and things.
Which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals live near the lake.
Literally just every animal. This is a blaring red alarm to come eat. Come chow down, because there's a disgusting fat man who pooped himself, and it's a great meal for you.
After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better.
Surely.
No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal of milk and honey and an additional lathering. This would be done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible.
But what was the point? It's not like bro can answer any questions. This is an interrogation. This is just torturing him.
It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door. They were probably trying to get a head start on their next meal.
Bro, somebody a long time ago started teaching rats that they can go through buttholes, and now that's just one of their default reactions. That's all they know how to do. Oh, there's a person? Let me get in their butthole. Apparently, that's what they do nowadays.
A writer named John Sonaris wrote in great detail about one of these incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms of punishment, since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight. He wrote about a man who survived for an entire 17 days before he finally died from his wounds. Apparently, the man spent his last few days with his entire face completely covered with wasps, and his flesh rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth. Number 1. The
What could be worse? What could be worse than that? What could be number 1? What am I looking at?
oubliette.
The what?
While being covered in his own filth.
The what?
Number 1. The oubliette. Oubliette simply means to forget in French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower, which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position for days on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick, inside of Warwick Castle. Here, deep underground in the castle's dungeons, is a very small and narrow cell.
It's just like a hole in the ground?
Completely made of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside of the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies.
My
The
God.
prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most of the time there would already be a rotting corpse inside of the cell.
So you would just have to die next to someone that's already dead? Oh my God.
To keep the new prisoner company. The previous
Oh, to keep him company, of course.
occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate. But that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons are completely infested with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh.
They really like human buttholes. We learned that. We already learned that from the last one. So they know already where to go.
But wait, there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times, they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not hundreds, of human remains inside of it, as proof that they were hardly ever cleaned. Like in Leap Castle of Ireland, where in 1900, during the castle's renovation, a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel. This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette, and what the worker found inside shocked him.
Why would you even go down there? Why would you even investigate? Would you not like have the knowledge of this history to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't look down there. Maybe I just tell somebody else.
Since it was filled with so many skeletons that they needed multiple cartloads to clear it all out.
Oh my
just when
God.
you think the section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and kept alive for years and years on end.
How? How are you alive for years in a pitch black little hole where all you got to do is poop? Wait, what if you eat the other people? Wait, but what would you drink?
Surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as humanly possible.
Why would you do that? Why would you just not want to die?
These cells were sometimes even placed on ground level so they can hear the voices and laughter of the people outside.
Oh
An
my
experience
God.
that they will never get again in this lifetime.
Bro, I'm so grateful that they're not putting me into one of those. This was messed up. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts. What else should I react to? Let me know in the comments. Bye-bye! Subscribe! Or else you're getting put in the oubliette. So you better subscribe!